Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
Hi everyone, Jason Hunt here, inviting you to join us every Saturday morning for news, the week's headlines in science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic books, video games, plus Comic-Con updates and the weather, and the occasional interview along the way. We call it Good Morning Multiverse. We hope you join us every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, right here on Sci-Fi for Me TV.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics, Myopic Proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, and tonight, welcome to the Critical Blast Drive-In Theater, where we are pleased and honored to have with us April Wright, the Director of Back to the Drive-In. April, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. I was just saying, I love your graphic there with the people watching us on the
I can draw nothing. I can steal from the best. I can make nothing myself. It's it's just the way the internet works for me. So I'm going to ask first what your fascination is with drive-ins, because this is not your first documentary about this particular kind of movie establishment.
That's correct. I called it Back to the Drive-In for a bunch of reasons. For me as a filmmaker, it's going back to the drive-in, because I went to the drive-in for my very first documentary that was called Going Attractions, the definitive story of the American drive-in movie. And that was the first documentary I ever made, and it covered the whole history of the drive-in. But I also wanted to call it Back to the Drive-In because so many people rediscovered the drive-in and went back during COVID. So there was this resurgence. But what the film is about is that behind the scenes, they're still having a really hard time for a lot of different reasons. And so I just wanted to raise awareness and get everybody to be thinking, even though COVID is, starting to be in our rearview mirror, that we need to remember the drive-in and still go back to the drive-in and support them if we want them to stick around. So all those messages are tucked in one title. Plus it sounds like Back to the Future, which
yes,
who doesn't like that? So
I was this close to like trying to find that clip from the movie and just overdubbing it with Doc saying, "We've got to go back to the drive-in."
Yes, somebody needs to make a meme or something that says that. That's exactly what it needs.
We'll work on that. Drive-in theater, though, that's of all the movie showing venues, that's the riskiest. I mean, you've only got a certain portion of the year that you can be open, and then you have to wait until a certain time so it's dark enough outside, and then you got to hope there's no fog, there's no rain, and then you find the people who decided to build a drive-in theater next to a railroad track. It's
Well, that was
just
super common,
so much.
actually. Many drive-ins are near railroad tracks, so that's somewhat an inside joke
It,
because it's
yeah, the one in
actually
Belleville, Illinois, is that way.
it's actually very common that there's so many near, or at least always used to be. Yeah. But
Yeah,
you're right.
and
I mean, and that is why it's not just about the movie. Going to the drive-in really is about the whole show, the whole experience that you have there, because you can interact with friends and the people that you came with and your neighbors, and it is a total experience. It's not just about seeing the movie. And that's why you should get there before dark, to get food, to set up, to enjoy the atmosphere and the whole experience. Some people tried gliding in right at dusk, right at showtime. They're kind of missing the whole point. It's because it's not totally about seeing the movie. It is about seeing the movie, but that's not the only attraction.
Yeah, it's you get to know the people who run the theater, which you don't generally get to know when you go into your megaplex or cinemaplex. It's just a stranger taking your ticket and telling you which aisle to walk down.
And a lot of the multiplexes are corporate owned, and pretty much all the drive-ins are family owned. They're family owned businesses. So that's where they're each a very unique experience. Some people say each drive-in reflects the owner, the person or the family that owns it. And I think that's true. That they, definitely you see in my movie, I visit 11 different drive-ins across the country, and even though they're facing the same issues, which I didn't know when I started making the film that was going to happen. I thought for sure, different factors would cause different things. But you really just see the cross section in my documentary that all of these places are so unique, and it is because of the people that own them.
It's it's like a carnival without rides.
Yes.
And then actually some of them do have rides. They have like a playground up right near the base of the screen where kids just go play under the movie that you're watching on the big screen. That's certainly the case in Belleville, Illinois, Skyview Cinema, where I've gone to see movies, which is next to a train track.
See?
And every time it came through, all I could think of was if you remember that Richard Pryor movie, Brewster's Millions. They played on a small-time farm league baseball field, and there was a train track that cut right through center field. They had to stop the game for the freight train to come through. It just always reminded me of that.
Yeah, that's funny.
Hero Shack Press says, I've never gone to a drive-through. I'm sure you mean a drive-in.
Yes.
Drive-throughs are like, that window on the side of the old Blockbusters where you got a movie through the window there. To see a movie for the first time, it's part of the trick to be able to enjoy the environment. Yeah, if you don't like being outdoors and, being, possibly disturbed by people talking, watch it at home is always an option.
Yeah, there's unique aspects to a drive-in, even definitely compared to home. I mean, you can't really create. I've seen people put screens in their backyards or whatever, so that's movies outside, but it's still not a drive-in. And even there were a lot of pop-up drive-ins on parking lot roofs and things like that, which is kind of, I call that like a drive-in light experience.
Yeah.
Like it gives you a taste of it, but it's still not the whole drive-in atmosphere because they really are designed as theaters. And that's one of the things I tried to show in the movie with some of the drone shots is that, it's not by chance. There really is a design to the way the cars flow in and the screens and the ramps for the cars so that every car has an optimal view of the screen and, the snack bar in the center. And so when you go onto a drive-in property, whether it's for the night to see a movie or even like I did with some of the owners during the day as they're setting up, you really feel like you're in a magical place. Like there is an environment there that is unique. And I think that adds to the whole experience. There, some people that I know were saying like, I already saw Top Gun at an IMAX indoor theater, but I want to go see it at the drive-in because I know it's going to feel different at the drive-in because you're outdoors and you have the elements. It's like the screen sometimes extends into the sky. So for certain films, they can be better at a drive-in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I noticed when I went to the drive-in more recently, this would be during COVID, because there was years ago when I was a teenager, and I wasn't watching the movie.
I was just gonna say you probably had some delinquency a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit, yeah. True story. You get home from the drive-in, and the next day, Dad says, "Why do I have to replace the rear view mirror on the windshield?" Truly, it was because we just flipped it up to get it out of the way, and the glue let go. But imaginations ran wild. But what I noticed going as an adult, and at least in more modern times, is that we have updated our cars to where no one can turn their headlights off. so you've got that.
Yes.
The lights are on auto all the time. People are like, how do I get it off? I can't get it.
That is a serious problem, more serious than you would think. There is one of the owners at the end that she makes a joke about how much time she spent on that night. And she says every new car owner should get a drive-in manual so they know how to turn their dome lights off if they release the hatch in the back or whatever. Yeah,
it can be done. It's a little knob, but
yeah, it is a thing. And I think another owner talks about how he figured out how to do it with the parking brake trick or whatever. Yeah, it is a problem. And some of the drive-ins, we actually see them putting things over the lights because they couldn't figure out how to do it. So yeah,
I saw that in the film.
Yeah, that is actually kind of a troublesome issue, that we've outsmarted ourselves with the cars to the point that we can't control them. So it's rough.
and the drive-ins have kind of contributed to the problem, because gone are the posts with the speakers that you would hang on your window. Now it's an FM broadcast, which means you have to have the car on, which is going to activate the lights.
Yeah. Well, you have to usually flip it backwards, and then you just get the energy without turning on the car. But so that transition happened, and it actually helped drive-ins for a while, because by the time that came into play, which was in kind of the late 70s and the early 80s, is when the radio sound started. And prior to that, most drive-ins, the majority were built in the 40s and the 50s, sort of after World War II during the baby boom. And so that wiring was getting on, going on 30 years old and sometimes longer. And it is underneath a lot of ground, and in some cases pavement. And so what they used to do in the old days was in the morning, in the day when they're cleaning up the trash, they would go through all the rows and have, some music or something playing, and they would listen to every single one, go down the row, listen, is this speaker working or is it damaged? If it was damaged, they would take it off and set it on the ground so that you would know, which ones had to be repaired or replaced. And this was like an ongoing daily thing. And then, of course, sometimes people would have them in the window and they would drive off with them or rip them out, or be embarrassed to turn them in if they did drive out with them. So it was a big problem. And so when the radio sound came in, people loved it. And it was initially only on AM radio. And people are like, why wouldn't it be on FM? Well, because back then, speaking of technology, cars did not have FM radio. No. FM radio didn't get into cars until later. And so it had AM, which is what most cars had at the time. And then eventually it switched over to FM radio. And that is what all drive-ins broadcast off of now. And it is a problem that people think somehow they can get it on their phone, but they can't, because it's just close area broadcast. It's not traveling through devices and through that, it's a different technology that people don't understand. Again, we've outsmarted ourselves. So that's another problem. They have so many people who think they can get it over their phone because it's on the radio or whatever, but they don't understand the close area broadcasting.
Yeah, it's a very limited range. Again, the drive-in that I used to go to, there were at the backside of it, there was a little ridge of trees and then houses on the hill. And I'm like, boy, if I was a kid and I had an FM radio, I would never go to the drive-in. I would just sit in the kitchen with the window open and my radio on.
Yeah.
Might be close enough to pick it up.
And that does work. Yeah. People who live near drive-ins, yes, they for years have been able to pick up that FM signal because they are close enough. Yeah.
just listen to funny. The movie. Mm-hmm. Now, drive-ins, at least today, I know this, like whatever you're going to see in a theater, you can probably see at a drive-in. But there's I don't want to say a stigma, but there's like a a thought in people's heads about drive-ins, the old time drive-ins, where the movies they showed were not the Oscar winners that you'd see in a theater, but they'd be more like the schlocky, gory monster kind of things that you wouldn't see in a respectable place. Some for the kids. Although I will say that there were 2 drive-ins where I live. One of them finally closed down. The one that stayed open is the one that showed the regular movies, and then there was actually an X-rated drive-in theater, and I was like, when I learned about that, I was still a teenager. I'm like, how does that work? Because you're like,
so all of these things we're covering. You should see my first documentary, The Going Attractions: The Definitive Story of the American Drive-In Movie,
which is linked below, folks. If you want to watch that on Amazon Prime, click it.
Because in that film, it's very, very thorough. It goes through the whole history, and it goes through all these different eras of what happened and how the drive-ins were impacted by different technologies or different, social things or whatever happened. And so we get in depth on all that. But yeah, so what you're describing, there was a phase when drive-ins were having a hard time getting product. And some of that coincided with this idea of multiplexes being built. And what happened with all these multiplexes was they needed more film prints. And so this is before digital distribution. So you only had so many prints of a film. And so those were going to go to the bigger indoor theaters first. And then later they were going to get to the drive-ins, or they were going to get to, the art house theaters or the smaller neighborhood theaters. And also there wasn't so much of this, opening weekend focus, that's a more, newer invention, this whole idea of everything's got to be made the first weekend. Didn't used to be that way. And so there were times when drive-ins just had a really hard time getting product, kind of like right now, because the studios are releasing so much less than they used to, getting through COVID here and beyond. But yeah, they had a hard time getting things. And so they were willing to play what we later started calling like direct to cable movies. So it was sort of these B movies or these second tier movies, not like you said, not the Oscar winners, not the big things. And so there was a phase where they were known for that. And then eventually that did creep into these, they were called XXX films. But if you look at some of those XXX films today, by today's standards, they might be R-rated. Like it's not like hardcore. It's 3 X's, but it's like, it's not like you can find on the internet any day, We
have a sliding scale now for movie ratings, really.
Yeah. So like you hear it and it sounds terrible, but the equivalent would be just like, in our movie that shows some boobs and whatever are what these XXX films were. But to see that on a big drive-in screen, driving down the road or whatever, that was shocking, for a lot of people, but yeah, it's a chapter that happened. And I think, for the drive-in owners now, what some of them said in my first film was, now it's come full circle, and it's really back to when they originally thrived, during the baby boom, when they were a family place, for kids. That's why they have the playgrounds and things like that. That's why they're built that way, to be family entertainment. And that's 100% what they are today. Those, the days of people partying at the drive-in or, making out in the back row. I'm sure some people still do, but, it's really families right now.
Very good. There's, maybe it's just me, but whenever I think of drive-ins, and particularly when I see the way they're built, the design, there's almost a Vegas-like design to drive-in attractions and the signs and such. I tie it to Route 66 for no good reason at all. Is there a relationship between that?
Yeah, you know what? I never heard that description, but I think that's a great description, Vegas-like. It's true that, and I think the common denominator is showmanship. That when these drive-ins were built, and again, you have to put in context that we didn't have. TVs were not a major factor. People were listening to radio at home. It was just like when they were, like a roadside Hollywood. You'd go out in a field somewhere, and then there would be this huge marquee with chaser lights or neon, and then there would be a big screen tower. And depending which part of the country, I noticed making my films that more in warmer climate like Texas and the South and California, they had really elaborate screen towers in some cases too, that had, paintings or moving neon murals on the tower. Less of that in sort of the colder winter states, because neon is not so great in the winter. So I think that's probably why they had it less. But yeah, they were roadside attractions, which is where you could compare it to Route 66, that, along Route 66, there were all these roadside attractions trying to attract you to come and eat at this diner or stay at this motel or go to this, whatever attraction somebody made up. And I think drive-ins had that same general idea, that they just wanted to be a family attraction, an exciting evening out. And so that showmanship of the lights and the elaborate designs in some cases of the towers, of the marquees, that was part of the draw. And that's one of the things that I really love about them.
Now I haven't watched the first documentary that you did, the Going Attractions one.
Based on your questions, you're going to love it.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
it's going to get deep on all the things you're like. You'll know the ins and outs once you watch it. Yeah.
Well, having watched the second one, one of the things that stood out to me was that you don't get in the way of your show as a director. It's, in fact, you are not on camera asking questions. Nobody's asking questions. We're just listening to the drive-in owners and their families talk and watching them go about their day. And I might, initially think I'm just going to watch this, but it's engrossing. It's like, I'm not getting that broken up by somebody interjecting something the way that everybody who's listening to you right now is thinking, come on, RJ, shut up and let her talk some more. Was that a conscious decision, and was that different than the approach of the first movie?
Yeah. So, I've done a few documentaries that have all, in the business, we call that talking heads. When you have, an expert or somebody who's lit nicely and sitting and, giving you some expert information. And my other documentaries, the first one about drive-ins, and then I made another one about movie palaces, and I made one about Hollywood stunt women. And all of those focused on the history of that topic, from the beginning of the invention all the ups and downs over all the eras through the present day. And so because those are historic, you're using a lot of clips. And so you need people talking about what they did or what they remember and intercutting it with the clips. And that is a great style of filmmaking. And for that type of topic, when it's historic, you need that. You need people sort of bringing you through the information, especially when it's something that happened, decades ago. But for this film, it's absolutely in the present. And so I decided to not use any archival footage, and I decided to not do any real sit-down interviews. There are points when people got to the point in the evening where they sat down because they, got the crowd in and got through the intermission or whatever, and then they wanted to sit down after being on their feet all day. And so sometimes when I'm talking to them, they're sitting down, or they're, at the end of the night where they can talk to me more. But mostly it's a verite style where I'm just a fly on the wall. I'm following them. We're immersed in the world of the drive-in from early in the afternoon when they get there and start preparing for the night to when the first customers start coming and they open the gates and, the snack bar opens, all the steps of it, getting the movie on the screen finally. And we just spend a long night sort of, following, getting to know all these owners who, like I said, are all very different. But by the time you get to the end, you realize they have a lot more in common than their differences. And so, yeah, I'm glad you said it was engaging, because I think these people are really fascinating and they have so much passion for what they do. And so I just wanted to let the story unfold by us experiencing it, not being told so much, but just kind of experiencing it. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you, what was your selection process? Because there's a lot of drive-ins out there, not as many as there should be, certainly not as many as there were. I've heard, year after year about the decline of the drive-in, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. But But you had a selection process. Say, okay, you're going to be on the show. I want to visit you. I want to visit you. How did that work?
Well, because that's a great question. Because I had made one documentary on the topic, there were a few people who, once they saw that film, they said, why wasn't I in that? I want to be in it. And so there were a few people that were just kind of on my list that had expressed interest. And so I went back to some of them and said, hey, I'm going to make a second drive-in documentary. Do you want to be in it this time? So I had a few to start with, but beyond that, and I should say then part two, a lot of the drive-in owners are part of a group where they have a conference every year. And I went to the conference and I told them I was thinking about making this. And if anyone else, wanted to be involved, let me know. So I had a few people who had volunteered kind of. But then beyond that, when I was initially thinking of making it, it was before COVID. And so I was initially going to do maybe 3 or 4 drive-ins and contrast them and get more in depth on what it was taking to run a drive-in. But when COVID hit and drive-ins were all over in the press and this, drive-in renaissance, people were calling it, I realized that because of COVID and all the differences that were happening around the country, that I wanted to show a bigger cross section. I wanted to show more places and more people and just kind of explore it a little more thoroughly. And so that's when I expanded it. And I chose just geographically different places. And I also chose drive-ins that had been around for a very long time. And I chose some drive-ins that are brand new, that just got built. And I chose the one in Nebraska, the Quasar, had just been built about a month before I was there. It just opened, brand new.
I didn't know they were making new ones. I thought they were just kind of like, keeping alive the old ones. So that's encouraging.
That one, the Quasar Drive-In, and the one I visited at the very end in the credits, the Memory Lane Drive-In, that's a brand new build. There are brand new drive-ins being built from scratch. Yes, I know. Who can imagine?
Fantastic.
So some really old drive-ins. I went to some with their single screen that only had one screen, and I went to some that had up to 7 screens. So I went to huge drive-ins, I went to small drive-ins, I went to old drive-ins, I went to new drive-ins, I went to drive-ins owned by women, men, older people, younger people, and for each place that I visited, they each kind of have their own little mini storyline that they're about. So kind of like you said, the Wellfleet in Cape Cod is about the tension built, whether they're going to be able to get the show on the screen because the fog is creeping in.
Right.
So that's got an easy storyline. But some of the others, like at the Brazos in Texas with Jennifer, she has owned her drive-in for 37 years. She's ready to retire, but she's looking for somebody who wants to keep it and run it like a drive, run it as a drive-in. She doesn't want to just sell out. And so her storyline is very much about the nostalgia. She's talking about, I thought I would miss 35 millimeter, but I like the digital, and, just talk about repairs on her screen. And she's very much, talking about how romantic drive-ins are and she's got this very wistful, nostalgic feeling for her storyline because she's getting to the end of her journey running her drive-in, and she's ready to hand it off to the next person. So each storyline has something unique that's going on within it. So I wanted to show the cross section, but like I said at the beginning, I didn't know until I got on the road, until I visited 3 or 4. I thought I needed a cross section to show the variety of things that might be occurring as a result of COVID, and also just maybe big drive-ins are more hard to run than a small one, or whatever it might have been. I didn't know what I would find. But after I went to 3 or 4 of them, I realized, wow, they're all telling me the same thing. They're all having the same issues. They all feel the same way about it. So their passion and the challenges actually turned out to be pretty much the same. And I didn't know that when I started.
Yeah, COVID's impact on a lot of businesses, obviously. I compare it to what happened in the comic industry. We, of course, do a lot of comic shows on here. We have the local comic shop guys on every other Saturday. And we started that back when COVID was first being introduced, because we want to see, okay, how is this impacting you? What's happening in your store? And a lot of stores were like, well, we've got to close down. We can't stay open. But there was one store in Little Rock, Arkansas, where they did not have a closure restriction because it's Arkansas. Nobody was getting COVID. So he was going to stay open, but the people who distributed the new comics and who made the new comics closed down. He had nothing to sell. And he did end up closing his stores permanently because he had no product. With the drive-in, that was a venue that people could go to because, hey, you're not an indoor closure. You can breathe freely outside. You're staying more than 6 feet away from the people who are not your immediate family. But there were no new movies being made because of COVID. So they were having to, do like the comic stores that stayed open. They had to sell back issues. They had to sell old stuff.
Yeah.
And you touch on that some in the film there, because I was looking at the marquees. I'm like, okay, I know she was not shooting this 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And that's been tough. And there were some of the kind of mini major studios that a lot of drive-ins started playing more product from, studios like IFC or A24 or some of these more independent banners that they normally would not have played. Usually most drive-ins play first run, or they play some retro titles. A few drive-ins play only retro titles. You'll see one of them in the film. But yeah, so they start going through the retro titles, but only certain retro titles will bring a big crowd. And then the others, they're trying, but it's kind of hit or miss. I'm sure there were points in times where people were just ready to get out of the house and see anything, no matter what it was.
Yes.
But having new films to attract people is important. And thankfully this summer, Top Gun is something that people have wanted to see. And the drive-ins a lot of them are bringing it back now because it's so great to see a film like that. With all those, aerial fight scenes on a big screen outside, that it plays really well. And like the Minions did really well this summer, for a family attraction. But like right now, there's not as much new stuff coming out, and a lot of the drive-ins are still open into the fall. So they're kind of like, let's bring Top Gun back because there's not enough new stuff. So
yeah. Well, people did want to get out and do something, and drive-ins were one of the very few entertainment options that were left. I mean, restaurants were closed, movie theaters were closed, Walmarts were closed, for crying out loud. And when you're looking at Walmart for entertainment, you're really hard up.
And some Walmarts even put drive-ins in their parking lots. That even happened too. They had a little bit of that going on briefly.
Amazing. But yeah, the drive-in was the place to go. The ad we play at the beginning of the show for Cosmic Comics, that is the video that Dave Dyer made to play at the Skyview Drive-In before opening credits and such, because he knew that was where everybody was going to be. And he was selling, his store was closed, but he was like selling out the back of the door, or I think he could have like 5 people in the store at one time. Just keep it very limited crowd. So he was, directing people in, and he said it worked.
Have the natural social distancing because you're within your car, so you don't have to interact with anybody. But yeah, and I think there was so much press about drive-ins and how they were such a thing. I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to make the movie, because I think a lot of people thought, oh, drive-ins are back, drive-ins are fine, like they're going to survive, they're all good. They're making money. They must be making a lot of money because they're like the only place open, but they're open, but they still had a lot of problems and restrictions and capacity and, all these things that, and you got to have extra staff to make sure people wear their mask and all this stuff. So I just wanted to kind of go a layer deeper on that and just kind of show that, yeah, they got more press, they got more popularity, but they're still really hustling to keep these places going. And I just wanted people to have an appreciation of that, because once you go to a drive-in, most people return. A lot of people still don't know they're out there. People are just like, I thought they were all gone. Well, you have to look sometimes, but and if you want them to stay alive, you do have to keep going.
Well, that leads into my next question here, because I'm sure that, during COVID, they were like here, and then during COVID, they kind of went here in terms of business. And of course, after COVID, I expect them to come back down. But did they come down as far as where they were to begin with? Did they plateau higher? Have they retained a new audience from all this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the jury's still out, but I think last year when other things opened up, like sports and things that had not happened, even just like kids playing sports together and, whatever it is, adult baseball leagues or county fairs and things like that had been closed down but started coming back again last summer. Drive-ins last summer did not do really well. And there was also minimal Hollywood product last summer.
Right.
So there was a shortage of movies and there was a competition with a lot of other things that had been closed for a couple years coming back. And so last year, on the whole, which is when I was filming, was not that great. This year, like I said, I think Top Gun helped not just drive-ins, but the whole movie industry, because however many billions that's made worldwide, it got people to go see something in theaters, and they didn't release it anywhere else, exclusive in theaters. And that made a big difference. And so I think there were enough movies and enough people feeling comfortable to go out again and sort of come back to the drive-in. And it sounds like they have gotten new people who started coming during COVID who are continuing to come. But they're not back to normal. I don't believe. Maybe a few are. Maybe had better years this year than others. But I think they're just kind of treading water right now. I think obviously it was better than last year, but are they back to like pre-COVID levels? I in general, I don't think so. So
I was hoping they would have trailed off to being higher than pre-COVID levels.
No,
with a new audience discovering them, but
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know all the numbers. I don't think they know all the numbers because the summer is still underway. But no, I think people, if they went to drive-ins during COVID and they had a good experience, you just need to be aware. You need to make it a regular thing. If you have one near you, you just need to go out and support them, and don't stream every night. Leave your house every once in a while.
But I stream every night.
Yeah, but if you stream, do you even remember what you watch? I mean, it's just all blur, right?
I do this every night.
It's just
I stream out.
Yeah, exactly. It just becomes. I always say that everybody watches things streaming, like it's great, but it's just kind of a blur what you watch yesterday, last week, last month, last year. You don't know most of it. You don't retain. Because it's not that good. But when you go to a drive-in,
remember a scene, and I'm like, where did I see that? What was that in? What movie was that?
Yeah. But when you go to a drive-in, it's an experience. It implants a memory. Like you won't forget when you went to the drive-in. You'll be talking about it for years with those memories. So it's just a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing, and you do remember.
It's funny. We talked with Howard Warshaw a couple of weeks back. He was an Atari programmer back in the days when Atari was a hot item, and now he's a psychotherapist. He talks about people watching things on streaming, and the way their attention span is now is like there's a 2.5 hour movie, because God knows we've made movies just be tremendously
way too long.
And they'll like, well, I don't have the time right now to commit to a 2.5 hour movie, but here's a series of something that's half hour long, and they'll watch 7.5 hours of that in a single binge instead of the 2.5 hour movie. So yeah, it is all a blur by the time it's all done.
Yep.
So traveling the country, seeing these different drive-ins, which one stuck in your memory the most for being like, wow, that is something I've never seen at a drive-in theater before. That is cool.
Well, I mean, I like you said, I've been on this topic of drive-ins for a long time. So I literally have been to over 500 drive-in locations. I have to give locations because when I was making the first film, I went to every single state except Alaska. There were drive-ins in Alaska. I just have not been there yet. But I went and first gathered firsthand footage as much as I could of open drive-ins, closed drive-ins, abandoned drive-ins, remnants of former drive-ins, and in some cases, the former site of drive-ins to see what is there today. So I have by far been to more drive-ins than anybody, and so I've seen it all.
I've got
But
an abandoned one down the street from me here. If you haven't been to Arkansas to see
what's the
it,
name of it?
it's I I really don't know, because honestly, it's like this open field, and the only reason I know it's a drive-in is because there's an old sign on the dilapidated building that said something something drive-in, and I
Hmm.
could tell that there was like they're knocked over posts where there used to be a screen,
Uh-huh.
but it's all grass. There's
Yeah.
no pavement, there's no
Well,
posts.
I did go
Um,
through Arkansas making the first film, so I might have been there. I'll have to look. I'll have to look up where I went in Arkansas.
I'll take a picture
Um,
the next time I go by it, because it's not that far from me.
yeah, but to make this film, I mean, things that surprised me, in particular, making the film. Um, when I was at the Galaxy, which is the 7-screen drive-in down in Texas with the Murray family, um, they had not been doing the biggest crowds, but Fast 9 had come out, and so I was there starting to shooting them, and I had my drone set up, and so I had my drone up in the air, and I was shooting the drive-in, and I'm like, oh, this looks fantastic, you guys. Do you want to look at the picture? And I flipped the drone around, and this footage is all in the film, but I flipped the drone around and was looking at the entryway, and you can just see this like crowd of cars backed up trying to get into the drive-in. And so I just show them that, like, yeah, everything looks great. Look at this. And they're like, wait, is that right now? Is that up front? Is that right now? Oh my God. Oh my God. Like, they're like, we got to open more ticket booths. We got to get out there and direct traffic. Like, because they had cars
I need to
backed
buy a drone.
yeah, they had cars backed up onto the street, and they weren't used to getting that kind of business. But that particular night, having the Fast and Furious Part 9, that was a new release. They hadn't had any new releases in a while. And so they were completely caught off guard to have that many cars that night. So that was kind of cool shooting, that they were even surprised. So yeah, everybody I was talking to, all of a sudden, they all went running to the front. They opened an extra ticket booth. And you can't quite see, I know in the aerial shots, but some of the aerial shots with the drone, the owner Martin is like out front there, like directing cars, trying to get the cars into all the lanes and off the street and all that. So that was kind of unexpected, that they suddenly had a mad rush that they did not expect. So that was kind of cool. And also, like, when I went to the Greenville drive-in, I knew that they were going to be showing Big Lebowski, and I knew he had a bar there, so I figured he'd be making White Russians. But they have a cookie shop in town that makes specialty cookies that go with the movies. And when you watch my documentary, you will see that they have these special dude cookies for the Big Lebowski. They're the coolest things. Everybody who watches the movie wants to have a dude cookie and a White Russian and go to their drive-in. And for me, that was just bonus. Like, I was not expecting these amazing cookies with have a little drawing of the dude on the cookie.
Yeah, and
So
wasn't the owner, and maybe it was a different there, it seemed like there was one where the owners would dress in theme with the movie, or like one of the
yeah,
characters from the movie.
yeah, they sometimes do, or their customers do. Yeah, people get into the movies that they play there. They make it like a themed party night around the movie. So yeah, they try to have cookies and drinks and different props and things that reflect the movie. So they really go all out for sure. Yep, that's the one, the Greenville. So there were little things like that, just some of the little details that happened during my journey of filming it, that you kind of know where you're going, but you don't know what's going to happen that night. I didn't know the fog was going to roll in the Wellfleet. Obviously, I knew I was going to film that night. You can't control that. So it was more things like that. It wasn't like any I knew where I was going. I knew generally what I was going to see. I knew basically the people, even if I hadn't met them yet. I knew kind of, who they were. But yeah. And then obviously once I got there, I just let it roll. Whatever happened, happened. Nothing was staged. Nothing was, it's just all, like I said, we're the fly on the wall, watching them, following them around, seeing what they really do.
The drama of a day in the life.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the your goingattractions.com site pinned to the top of the chat, folks. If you want to check that out, I will edit this video afterwards just to put that link below the video. So if you're watching this on replay, it's right down there. Also, right below the video is the link to the Amazon Prime for the Going Attractions first film.
The first one, yeah. Yeah, it's on a bunch of streamers right now. You can find it, that one. So it's available.
Okay. Is there on the website, is there a guide to where people can go to see Back to the Drive-In, because it's in drive-ins?
Yes, not actually. I don't have Back to the Drive-In because it's been changing so much. It's only in theaters. Back to the Drive-In will be streaming eventually. It will be on Blu-ray eventually because I shot it all in 4K. And so it will be out in sometime later in the fall. But because it's about the importance of seeing films in theaters and supporting the drive-ins, it is only playing in theaters. And so I had a special kickoff on National Drive-In Day, which is June 6th. That's the day the very first drive-in opened in Camden, New Jersey, June 6, 1933. And so we did a kickoff on 20 drive-in screens in 14 states, which was awesome. And at a few of them, I was even a double feature with Top Gun Maverick. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. And then starting August 12th, I started releasing it into theaters, and it keeps expanding every week. So I put a lot of posts in social media and Twitter and Instagram and all that. So if you look up Back to the Drive-In, you can probably find things posted about where it's playing. But it's at a bunch of different indoor theaters and drive-ins this week. And yeah, you have people watching everywhere, so we don't need to get into the local area, but yeah, it's all over the place.
All right. That's 3 movies now about drive-ins, isn't it? Or was that
two about drive-ins, and then I did one about movie palaces, about the big, old, ornate, historic single-screen theaters that used to be in every major city. That one's also going attractions, and then the other documentary I did is about stunt women.
Oh, that's right. I saw that one. Yeah, we had. Gosh, I remember the multi-screen theaters were coming up in Belleville, again, Southern Illinois, right across from St. Louis, where I was a teenager. But before that, there was still the Lincoln Theater in downtown. It was the big screen of the big theater because it had 2 screens in it. And to see the second movie, you had to go upstairs. And I mean, it was like, here's a door, and you climb up this narrow flight of wooden steep stairs.
I bet. Do you think they split the balcony off? Do you think that's what they did?
I have no idea how they did it, but it was like you went into this separate room with theater seating, and there was. I remember I saw
Lincoln
Ghostbusters
Theater in Belleville.
Yeah, the Lincoln Theater in Belleville, Illinois. I remember I saw Ghostbusters 2 there, and the film burned.
It sounds like so all those movie palaces and neighborhood movie palaces. So in a big city, like New York or Chicago or LA, in the downtowns, they might have had like 3,000 seats. But when you get to a little bit smaller towns, they might have had like 700 or 800 seats. But a lot of them had balconies. And so a lot of them eventually split the big theater into 3 theaters or 2 theaters. They put something down the middle, and some, if they had a balcony, they would make that sort of somehow block that off and make that an upstairs downstairs theater.
I think it's what they had to have done. I mean, Belleville is
guessing that based on what you're describing. I'm going to try to look it up right now, but
yeah, where that theater is like, it's not out near a shopping complex. It's in the middle of Main Street, and Belleville has a beautiful downtown,
exactly where they were.
Downtown Main Street.
Exactly where these places are definitely on the main street downtown. Oh, it's still there. Lincoln Theater.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely still there.
And 3 screens.
Oh, they must have split the balcony into 2 and kept the bottom level.
Maybe. So yeah, it says originally seating 1,800. So that's pretty good sized. So yeah, it definitely got split later. So interesting. Oh, there we go. It does say the balcony was converted into twin auditoriums.
There you go.
Yeah. And seating on the main floor was vastly reduced to 584 seats for modern day audiences that needed more legroom. So yes, they actually put 2 of them up in the balcony.
And it's old architecture too. I mean, it's like, it's not a new building. It's very much, probably 1800s that building was there.
Yep, it's opened in 1921, so that's before talking films. So it played
Yeah,
silent films.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's really
definitely a
cool.
historic landmark.
Yep,
Any
really
plan
cool.
for a third one? I mean, you got to do these in trilogies now. That's the way
Yeah.
marketing goes.
I probably will do another drive-in one someday, but under my going attractions label. So, the going attractions idea are that these places really were attractions. They were, things that drew you and that families went to. So the first was drive-ins, the second was movie palaces. And when I was on the road last summer shooting drive-ins, this one, Back to the Drive-In, I also shot a bunch of B-roll for 3 more going attractions documentaries. So the next 3 are going to be about bowling alleys, roller rinks, and regional or mom and pop amusement parks. The smaller amusement parks, not Disney, not Six Flags, but the little ones that used to be all over our country.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize. So when I was on the road shooting this Back to the Drive-In, I mapped out and visited as many, roller rinks, bowling alleys, or sometimes buildings that used to be roller rinks or used to be bowling alleys, and also these family-owned amusement parks wherever I could find them. So I just need to do all the interviews now. That's another history. These are all history ones. So I'll do the sit down interviews and use all the archival footage and whatever I shot.
Well, looking forward to that because, yeah, I guess I grew up in just the right Midwestern town because, like, we had the bowling alleys that were special. We had the roller rinks that were, flashlight tag and all that stuff you played at a roller rink for when you'd go skating. And I can't think that we had a mom and pop amusement park because we did have Six Flags over Mid-America and so many other places in St. Louis, but perhaps right next to Six Flags, there is Jellystone Park.
Oh, see,
which
perfect one.
Yeah. And, it's got the big Yogi Bear out in front
That's
holding
still
up
there?
the sign. Oh, yeah. 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 You've been there.
So, yeah, interesting. So that you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's it's very nostalgic set of documentaries you're working on here because I don't know. I know bowling is never really going to go away. It's
Well,
it's a sport.
but I'll tell you in a sad way, yes and no. Because of COVID, I've seen more bowling alleys closing than anything. A lot of
Really?
bowling alleys not making it to the other side of being closed so long for COVID. Yeah. A lot of bowling alleys getting torn down in the last year. So I don't know. I don't know the numbers yet. I'm not that far into it, but it won't go anywhere. I mean, bowling's been around a long time, but the number of places to bowl is definitely getting reduced.
Yeah. Now roller skating, I don't know that that's still as big a thing as it used to be, but
there's less rinks, but roller skating itself, big upswing during COVID. Lots of people on TikTok skating and filming themselves skating, and they turned the Rockefeller Center ice rink into a roller rink this year. So roller skating is on an upswing. I don't know for sure about the rinks themselves, but yeah, interesting, huh?
absolutely. Well, when these get finished, you know where to find us, and we can talk further about these attractions.
Now, I
But,
just real quick, I pulled up the list when I was on my first road trip where I went in Arkansas and saw drive-ins. So Fayetteville, the 112, which is still open, but this is their last weekend coming up. They're closing that drive-in, sadly.
oh no.
And then Springdale was another one I went to. That drive-in used to be called the Grove, but it was abandoned and had trucks parked in front of it when I went there. And then the other one I went to, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Siloam Springs.
Siloam Springs, yes.
Yes. And that
This one is none of those. I just
none of those.
realized
Okay.
I live in Arkansas, but if I walk to the end of the block over here, I'm in Missouri.
Right, right.
And that's that theater that I was talking about would be actually in probably one of the southernmost regions of Missouri here.
Oh, on the
Arkansas
Missouri
border.
side. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's and it's really in the middle of a nothing area. I think there's like a gas station catty corner from it. I'll get a picture. I'll send it to you in email because I'll be driving past it in a couple of weeks here when I go back to St. Louis. So I'll remember to stop and take some shots.
Well, I'm looking at Missouri. I went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, like 14 or 15 locations I went to in Missouri. So maybe I have been there.
this, like I said, it's a big patch of grass on the corner of on an intersection. Is like right there at the intersection. It's a little building, and there's nothing there. It's
Interesting. Well, I always like to find those remnants. It
Oh,
tells you
like I said,
something about the town. When you go to the town and you kind of see, oh, here's where the roller rink used to be. Oh, they had a drive-in out there. Like it tells you a little bit about the history. And for me, I kind of feel like I don't know that we're better off without these places. I feel like, there's whatever forward thinking advancement, but I think sometimes when these places get torn down and you put a Walmart or something else there, or it just becomes an empty lot, I think some of the fabric of the community is lost. So I think that's a little bit of subtext in some of my stories, that having places like this, family owned businesses, places that are, for family recreation and connecting with the community. I think when we have less and less of them, that we're more isolated, and we're seeing some of the effects of that aren't good. So I'm all for keeping these places going, because I do think they're important for the communities where they are at.
I completely agree. April, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight and sharing your documentary with us. People do go to the website, which will be below here. If you're watching this, not now, so if you're watching it later, when later is. It's your now. It's not my now. It's your now. It'll be below there. Go check out the links to both and find where this documentary is playing. Go see it. It's going to have a lot of fun. And of course, go to the Amazon link or your streaming service of choice and catch Going Attractions, the one that came before, and bone up on what you need to know before the second one. You watch that. If you are getting ready to leave here, please pop over to the mic stand where Mike Walters is getting ready to go over all the niche news of the day in pop culture, everything from comics, anime, and professional wrestling. So we do hope you'll head over there and give him that good old like, share, and subscribe business. If you want to do that here too, you're completely welcome to. I never push that. I keep forgetting. April, everyone tells me I run my podcast wrong, and I have to agree with them because I've been at it for 6 years and I make nothing at it. But I get so involved in talking with the guests about, because it's about you. It's about what you're doing. That's why you're here. And I just don't get into that whole, hey, hit those super chats, folks. Be sure to hit that like, subscribe button, share this out there. Do share the video out there so that more people can meet April and see what she's doing. That's why I would say to share it. But folks in the audience, thank you so much for being here tonight. We don't have a show without you. We're just a podcast falling in the woods, I like to say. And while you were here, as always, we just hope you had a blast. Good night, everybody.